But first, Mr. Finn.
Yeah.
It is time for one of my favorite segments, but definitely my favorite titled segment. It's Daniel in the Deacon's Den.
Oh, yes.
Good morning, Deacon Dan Brahier.
Good morning, Ron. Good morning, Dave. How are you guys this morning?
Doing great.
Couldn't
How are
be
you?
better, as a matter of fact.
Fantastic. I am actually calling in today from Salt Lake City, where I am out here for a conference. It's an annual conference that actually wraps up. Today's the last full day, and I'm heading back home. So it is an annual meeting of the National Association of Diaconate Directors.
Oh, nice.
It's really a great organization. I'm not sure how much people realize or understand that the organization even exists. But basically what it boils down to is that if you think about every diocese in the country has got permanent deacons, and those deacons are overseen by somebody. So my job in the bishop's office is to oversee the selection and the formation and the ordination and then pastoral care of permanent deacons in our diocese and their families. And so while we have about 165 deacons in the Diocese of Toledo, there are close to 20,000 deacons around the country. And each diocese has got anywhere from, I think I talked to somebody yesterday that their diocese has 20 deacons. And I talked to somebody yesterday whose diocese has 800 deacons.
Wow.
So it depends on where you are.
How many in ours?
By the way, there are about 165.
165 deacons. Wow,
yeah, isn't
that's
that amazing?
beautiful. Yeah, that's so fabulous.
About half of our deacons are senior status in Toledo, and half are active. Although you got to be careful how you use that word, because we don't want to tell say that most of our senior status deacons are not active,
right?
Because
right.
they may, you know what I mean? They may technically be considered senior status, and yet a lot of these guys are in their 80s or 90s, and they're out there still preaching and doing all the things that they do. I see a lot of those. It's we had a deacon that passed away in our diocese a few months ago, who was 94 years old. And when he died, he was still driving every Wednesday a half hour to play tennis on Wednesday mornings.
Oh, man.
And the deacon who preached at his funeral is 91. It's amazing how deep into ministry men can be beyond 75 or whatever. But bottom line is there is so much shepherding to be done around the country, because there are so many people who do the same thing that I do in other dioceses. And so we get together. There's what we call Region 6, which is Ohio and Michigan, and the directors of deacons of our two states get together every fall, usually in October. And then this is an opportunity a couple weeks after Easter every year for everybody to get together that is around the country. And so I'm at the table last night with people from Texas and Michigan and New York and Chicago and you name it. Kind of comparing notes on what we do and how we organize things. So yesterday morning, we actually celebrated Mass together with Bishop Solis, who is the Bishop of Diocese of Salt Lake City. And one of the things that I learned, I didn't even know, that Salt Lake City Diocese is the entire state of Utah.
Is it really?
I didn't realize that. So this bishop oversees the entire state. So what a great man. Good sense of humor. In fact, he's going to be speaking to us again this morning. In the evening last night, we had a presentation by Father J.T. Lane, and he served on the committee that revised the ritual book for the exposition of the Blessed Sacrament.
Oh, wow.
That came out last fall. Yeah, and it's fascinating when you think about it. We have all these new ritual books that are coming out on, the OCIA and exposition and so forth. And, somebody's got to write those things. Right. And the thing is that in our position, we're also responsible for implementing those and making sure that the deacons in our diocese know what's going on. So this is a chance to sort of talk to those people who had their boots on the ground and did the writing itself. And so he shared with us a number of things that were really interesting. Here's one of them, because I know this has come up in parishes even over the last few months. When you do Eucharistic adoration, in the back of the of a typical missal or whatever, we always do that line, "You have given them bread from heaven," that responsory. And in the new ritual, it's not there. And so people were like, well, why did they get rid of that phrase and its response? And come to find out that one of the major reasons why they're doing these updates of all the ritual books is that we're going back to the original Latin translation. And the idea is to make it more universal, to make sure that every church in the world is using effectively the same translation in their own language, of course, but that it's all based on the same translation. And that phrase, "You have given them bread from heaven," that responsory, was kind of a cultural thing that was done in the U.S. and kind of found its way into some of the books, but it was never officially in the Latin in the first place. And so in the new translation, it's just dropped.
It's going to be hard not to chant back the, having all sweet. We were so programmed on our responses.
Exactly. And it's things like that you kind of go, okay, because the question comes up that, for example, we were in deacon formation this spring, practicing the doing Eucharistic exposition. And, the men asked, well, where is that line? It's not in the book anymore. And I actually didn't have an answer to that question. But you're right, it's not there. Well, now I know, it's not supposed to be there. Now, is it wrong to do it? No. I mean, you can certainly make local modifications, but the bottom line is they're trying to streamline it to make sure that everybody is doing exactly the same thing, and so that line isn't there anymore. And so it's things like that allow us to be able to pass on to others. Because we're ultimately in charge of forming these deacons, we need to be able to answer the questions. We had a presentation yesterday from the people who do the focus inventories. That it's the pre-marriage inventory where they ask questions of the guy and the woman, and then they compare notes and see how they responded, and they use that as discussion point for marriage preparation. Well, the focus people have been around for 40 years now. They've developed a couple of new inventories. For example, an inventory that can be used with a couple that's already married. That if they're, if they want to strengthen their marriage, maybe you're doing retreats with couples or whatever. What is the new inventory? What kind of questions do they ask? How does it get scored? All that kind of thing. So, we had an opportunity to see what some of the questions are and how we might use that. Because again, as deacons in our ministry, we're doing that kind of thing, preparing people for marriage and meeting with people who are already married all the time. And we need to know what the best tools are, out there for them, so they bring us up to speed on those kind of things that are going on.
Well, there's so much that deacons do and take charge of and oversee. And it must be great, that sense of brotherhood when you all get together on an annual basis there for the National Association of Directors of Deacons. So that must have been really great to see, put faces to everybody that you've probably been on an email string with, right?
That is definitely true. And, some of these guys, I only have an opportunity to see them once a year if I've ever met them at all. And so, there definitely is a brotherhood, and especially when you can get together with people who are doing the same thing you're doing, just like any other profession, or ministry, you can feel really isolated, like I'm the only one that's doing this, or I wonder what they're doing right across the border. And I know that our Bishop Thomas, is wonderful in this regard, that he really wants to make sure we are connected and plugged into what other dioceses are doing. And so if I'm proposing something or saying, hey, maybe we ought to think about this, he will often ask, what are they doing in Detroit? What are they doing in Cleveland? How does this compare to what's happening in Cincinnati or Chicago? And so this just really gives me an opportunity to pick the brains of these guys and say, hey, how do you handle this situation, or what do you do when this happens? And sometimes I'm the one giving them an idea they haven't thought of, but most of the time they're giving me ideas I've never thought of. I was reflecting on this last night, because when I retired from the math education world, I had been teaching math for over 40 years, and I was the guy writing the books and giving the presentations, And now I go to this, I'm the baby deacon. I'm the one who's meeting with guys who have been doing this for 20, 30 plus years. And they're the experts, not me.
Well, thank you.
If nothing else.
Thank you, Deacon Dan. I want you to do this real quickly. When everybody's gathered there today, I just want you to stand up in the middle of the crowd and say, how many of you have a weekly segment on your local radio station? And then just go, nah, 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 nah. Just do that for us. And if you'd have someone running video, we'll use that for a promotional piece later on. Thank you very much, Deacon Dan.